Storytellers Campfire radio shows are heard in over 100 countries around the world. Our main programs are Author's Voice, Poetry Wheel, Storytales Radio Show, The Golden Ark of Treasure, The Charlie Checkers Show, Campfire Musicians, and On the Line Public Interest News. Every show is unique and provides interesting programs for our listeners. Join us each week in our Campfire on Tuesday at 12 o'clock noon on XRQK Los Angeles and Airtime America. To learn more about Storytellers Campfire, visit online at storytellerscampfire.org.
Welcome to On the Line Public Interest News. I'm your host, Rich Gehlhausen. Today's program will be the second in a series of programs we intend to produce over the next year, dealing with the various levels of child trafficking and prostitution. Our purpose in producing this series is to inform and educate the public of this growing global issue. The Washington State Attorney General, Bob Ferguson, recently stated, and I quote, "The commercial sexual exploitation of children remains a serious problem, and we must come together to tackle this problem and protect our children," unquote. Well, last month we interviewed Michael Fairfax of the Justice and Soul Foundation. On today's program, we'll interview Dr. Lois Lee, founder and president of Children of the Night, the oldest, largest organization combating child trafficking. Carlyn Sampson, the program coordinator of Rebuilding Hope, the Sexual Assault Center of Pierce County, Washington. Noel Gomez, co-founder of Seattleops, the Organization for Prostitution Survivors, and Sophia Sanders, the Director of Programs and Operations of Stolen Youth. But first, we'll take a short commercial break, and we'll be right back with Dr. Lois Lee.
On the Line Public Interest News with Rich Gehlhausen is reminding everyone child trafficking is a problem which is increasing, and parents, you can help protect your children. Keep reminding them of the 10 safety rules to keep safe and away from harmful strangers. Number 1, use the buddy system and do not walk alone. Number 2, don't take rides from strangers. Number 3, do not hitchhike. Number 4, practice yelling help. Number 5, do not go to a car where an adult is asking you to help them. Number 6, if an adult tries to take you, scream. Number 7, pull away and keep yelling, "This is not my parent." Number 8, never go into a house without your parents' permission. Number 9, if an adult asks you to keep a secret, tell your teacher or your parents right away. Number 10, use a kid's code. Any adult without the family code, do not go with them. Parents, keep reviewing the safety rules. As a public service, the 10 safety rules will be available for free download at ontheline.webs.com and at storytellerscampfire.org.
You're listening to On the Line Public Interest News in Progress, and I'm your host, Rich Gehlhausen. Well, our time is limited, so we're going to get right to it and start with Dr. Lois Lee. Hello, Dr. Lee. Welcome to our program.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Lee. Can you please tell us about your organization, what your organization does?
Well, Children of the Night was founded in 1979 when I was doing research. I was researching police reports filed on prostitution for my doctorate's degree, and I found the most common age on those police reports were 19, and went out on the streets to talk to some of the girls and found kids as young as 11 years old working as prostitutes in Hollywood. So I had a hotline, and during the process I used that data to sue the police departments for not arresting the men who pay prostitutes. I sued LAPD twice and LA County Sheriff's once. And during those times there were 10 young women who were killed by 2 murderers known as the Hillside Stranglers. And because of my work in the courtroom and meeting all these young women and talking to girls on the street, I became the link, and I was the person they called when one of the girls was missing, the 11th victim, and called the police to tell them where she was, and they refused to go because she was just a whore. And that little whore turned out to be a 17-year-old, blonde-haired, blue-eyed little girl who was laid nude on a hillside after she'd been tortured. And after that, I found the kids on the street, and I let them come stay at my house, and social services were not willing to help them because prostitution was a crime, and probation and juvenile courts were not willing to put them in programs because the crimes were not against property. So I had started the first sex trafficking hotline in America in 1977, and set up, but my house was basically the first residential program, even though it wasn't really a program. I just had kids sleeping on the floor and on the sofas, and that was in 1979, and I had developed street teams all over the western region of the United States where we went out and got kids on the streets and brought them in and offered them services. And then from there, it just was the 10 years it took for me to raise money to set up the Children of the Night home, which was a $4 million setup. We're entirely privately funded. We still need to raise $2 million a year. And we have a 24-bed shelter. We bring kids in from all over the United States.
Mm-hmm. I understand that you have global programs as well as national services for children.
Yes. Well, we moved into New York and started taking kids off the streets in New York because there were no other residential programs in North America for these kids, and received a really good response from NYPD. And then I was in Rome in October 2012 on sabbatical. And unfortunately, I take me where I go, and I started looking around and realized that the natural resource of my work, after training hundreds of NGOs and thousands of individuals who wanted to replicate my work and no one ever had, as I looked around, I realized there were nuns and there were priests that wanted to do sex trafficking work, and that the natural resource for this work was someone who had committed their life to helping the unfortunate, and it was right in front of me. And also realizing that these people had buildings, they had convents, they had parishes that were provided by the Vatican, and that they also had educational programs, and that right in front of me I could do something, but because I'm a sociologist, I'm not a social worker, and by looking at the systems in terms of how we could coordinate these existing systems to provide these services, and NYPD has been very helpful in introducing me to the Carabinieri and other government officials in Rome to try and set up programs. And I was invited to, if I learned my Italian, to teach in one of the Pope's universities, to teach nuns and priests from around the world who come to learn about their Catholic values and about how to set up programs for trafficking victims. So I've been on the streets with religious orders and nuns and priests all throughout Italy. And the problem is very similar. They have an international trafficking problem, which are older kids. They have young kids, but not too many within their own country that they've not really addressed yet. I was in London before this whole breakout of the realization that members of Parliament and high-ranking police officials had been having sex with children in orphanages since the 80s and maybe even before that. And the entertainment industry, particularly the music business and television business, the BBC, were all involved in it, and they all turned their head. And one of the things that I'm trying to really push in London is the fact that Britain needs to publish the list of their convicted sex offenders so that parents know who they're bringing into their home, who they're hiring as coaches and tutors. They have a different system where particularly a person's supposed to have a certificate saying they're cleared, but that's not a really good system because you could get a certificate and then abuse someone the next day and you're still running around with that certificate. So there's a lot of work to be done there. And I think they're moving very quickly and steadfast, and they're committed, and they're prosecuting people no matter how old or no matter what their mental condition is. It's a big job, but they've got a really good group of people that I'm very respectful of. I'm very impressed with.
You know, it sounds to me, just well, I think it's pretty obvious anyway, but in order to change what has been happening, perhaps for thousands of years, but especially today, during the day, when we have such global trafficking, it sounds to me that you've got a big job attempting to change attitudes from not just men in general, but I don't know how else to say it. People's attitudes about this.
Well,
must
I don't
change.
know that I just when you think you've changed it, I mean, now you see all of these celebrities out with their trafficking organizations and their television shows, and it's really kind of pathetic to me because none of them are really helping the victims on the end. They're promoting the issue, they're exploiting the issue for their own personal gain. And just when you think that you're really doing it, then you see other people who are in a position to help actually using these kids for their own advancement, whether it's a documentary or it's a television show or, and that's frustrating. But, I've been in situations with, I have a friend who's helped me a lot, who's a fairly famous actor, I don't want to mention his name, who has played some, very sexual bad boy kinds of roles. And we were on the red carpet at a fundraising event for Children of the Night, and the way that the paparazzi treated him, I was just appalled. It was like being in the 1960s, standing up in a middle school and trying to talk about homosexuality. People are just not comfortable with their sexuality, and that goes to the root of prostitution and the lack of intimacy and the objectification of it, whether it's not just women, it's objectification of men and children and everyone else too. I don't know, in Europe they deal with it. I've learned a lot from them. They deal with it much differently, where prostitution is not illegal and that a brothel is illegal. So if two women are working out of an apartment, then that becomes something that's not acceptable, and living off the proceeds of a prostitute is not acceptable and is also a criminal act. In America now, the gangs have taken over child prostitution, and the trafficking laws are so severe that pimps are now using kids for residential burglaries and carjackings and all kinds of other serious kinds of crimes because the penalties are not nearly as severe. So one of the things I'm really trying to fight for is to get Congress to look at the fact of making it illegal, the same laws as we use for sex trafficking, for anyone to use any child in any kind of crime. Why can't we just protect our children? Why does it just have to be sex? And it really goes to the sexual dysfunction, the sexual repression of America.
We've only got a couple more minutes for your time, Dr. Lee, but what can the public do to help? What can the public do? People that are concerned about this?
It's privately supported, and we're the only place in North America where a child can call from a seedy motel or a truck stop, and we are able to rescue them. We coordinate with law enforcement to go out and pick them up, take them to the police station, then take them to an airport to where we prepay the airline ticket. We meet them at the airport, and they're in our shelter within 24 hours. We need money to pay for those airline tickets. We need money to care for those kids. So I ask people to help us do that because you can help. There's no donation that's too little or too large. And go to childrenofthenight.org. We have a very active website. We're one of the few trafficking organizations who do what we say we do on the website. We're there 24/7. So please help.
Well, thank you so much, Dr. Lee. Please stay on the show.
Thank you.
As we go through our next guest, hopefully our next guest is Carlyn Sampson, Program Coordinator of Rebuilding Hope. Carlyn, are you on the line?
Yes, I am, and I'm here with my director, Tasha Smith, as well.
Oh, very good. So can you tell us about your organization? There's a couple of things that I wanted you to talk about in particular regarding Pierce County, but overall, can you tell us about your organization?
Sure. I was actually going to get Tasha to get started with talking about Rebuilding Hope, the Sexual Assault Center for Pierce County, just to give a little bit of a historical context as to who we are and how we got started, if that's okay.
All right, thank you. Yes, ma'am.
Hi.
Hello.
So the Sexual Assault Center for Pierce County has been around since 1975. That's when we became a 501c3. And it originated as a program called Rape Relief that because a group of women from the Tacoma Learning Center identified that there was nothing in Pierce County that could support people who had been sexually assaulted or sexually abused, they decided to come together and create this organization called Rape Relief, and then in 1975 it became an official nonprofit agency. So we've been around for about 40 years now, specifically doing crisis work around sexual assault. And